Welcome to the weekend update. Now I'm going to start off with the UK this morning, and it's amazing how many parallels we can draw between the UK and the US, going back to universities, for example. Then I want to look at some new information from Canada, which is concerning but not surprising. We'll see what that is in a minute. And then we'll look at the United States and some new research from Houston, Texas, on mutation of this virus. Now I'll give you the bottom line on the mutation story now in case you don't want to watch. The bottom line is that this mutation does seem to make the virus more transmissible, easier to catch. It does not make the virus more deadly, not more pathogenic. It doesn't seem to make people sicker or make them more likely to die. But of course it could well have accelerated the rate of transmission in the pandemic, because it does seem to increase transmissibility in terms that it increases viral shedding in the early parts of the condition when someone is most infectious. So that's the bottom line of that if you want to skip it. It is interesting. Do stick around if you've got the time. Let's start looking at what's going on. Now the United Kingdom, the COVID symptom tracker app, dear me. This is the figures here are getting on for 20,000 new cases in the day of symptomatic COVID. And we know that the symptom tracker app always underestimates. And we can see this is way higher than the official number of cases. But we do know that when the data filters through, sometimes from the Office for National Statistics in 2 or 3 weeks' time, it so often is very, very accurately collaborating and agreeing with the data from the COVID symptom tracker app. So I do fear that this is the current state of play in the UK, a great increase in cases, as we see on this screen here. France we've got here for comparison. The actual number of new cases in France now is over 16,000 a day. The United Kingdom officially here for the last week we've got under 6,000. We know the real numbers are now just over 6,000 because these are the weekly averages. And when there is an increase within the week, a dramatic increase within the week, as there has been in the UK and France, then of course the weekly average is going to be lagging behind a bit. Now, it's also interesting to note the deaths in these countries, which I've gone to the logarithmic scale for. Still both relatively low, but the thing is both are increasing and hospitalisations in both countries are increasing. So I am concerned about both countries. Now, just to put this in a bit of context, as we always try and do, we can see here that if we take the UK line there, for example, which is the UK line, that's the UK line there. Now, these number of cases at the peak of the UK outbreak, we can see there was about just under 5,000 new cases per day at the peak of the UK outbreak. So we can see that the number here is actually higher than at the peak back before the lockdown at the 23rd of March. But of course we know this is wrong because the number of cases that were diagnosed in March, April were about 50 times less than the real number of cases. And we've argued this very strongly on previous episodes. So the real numbers here, are probably 200,000. It's way off the scale, way off the scale. So we're nowhere near, even at the 20,000 new cases, which we probably are now, we're nowhere near where we were in March. But the direction is up and the numbers can double every week. So this is why we're concerned about it. So, getting on for 20,000 new cases a day. In fact, by the time you consider 20% of asymptomatic cases, it's over 20,000 cases. Current symptomatic cases, 177,054 in the UK, according to the COVID symptom tracker app. Now, the UK is following the United States in the return to universities debacle. I mean, this really is, well, I was going to say comical. It's not. It's serious, really serious stuff. I mean, we anticipated this, you and me, on this channel weeks ago. We were predicting this weeks ago. We saw it happen in the United States. We see it happening now in the UK. It was obviously going to happen. And people that are in universities are supposed to be the intellectual elite in the country. What has gone wrong here? I mean, 32 universities with confirmed cases in the UK. Now, we didn't predict the number, but of course we predicted this as what would happen. This is inevitably going to happen. So to give one example, we looked at Glasgow University a couple of days ago, various universities in Scotland with lots of cases, lots of students isolating. Manchester Met University, 1,700 students will isolate for 14 days, 99 tested positive. Students isolating in the halls of residence, and they are not very happy. Scottish students banned from pubs and restaurants. Now this is a key thing. We've got students coming from all over the country to share halls of residence, and we now know in the past few days to attend parties, and you can imagine what's going on there. From all parts of the country, the spread was absolutely inevitable. Quite incredible. And now the big risk is that the infection will spill over from what is now clusters, hotspots, in student accommodation into the general community, potentially massively accelerating the spread of the disease. Massively. This could put a naught on the end of it, but you can increase it by a factor of 10. It's just incredible. The risk here. Now, people know about this. So Scottish students are banned from pubs and restaurants. Now, this is a student writing in Scotland. We were told to come to university halls. So the students were told to come to the halls of residence. Fine, that's what they were told to do. One hall of residence in Scotland, 48 people from across the country in one building. I mean, really, go figure. I mean, the very least the university authorities could have done in Scotland in this situation was say, well, you're from that part of the country, you go into this particular student bubble. I mean, this is known by the general public now. And yet this happened. The student says it was inevitable this was going to spread. Yeah, of course it was. We said this weeks ago on this channel. It's inevitable this is going to spread. There's no reason for us to be here because everything is online. Makes sense. So, to call this a debacle is to be fairly conservative with language, really. It's just a complete fiasco as far as I can see. But there you go, that's where we are. So given that's where we are, it is essential, students watching this, I know it's hard for you, but it's essential that you isolate in place, in your bubbles, within your university accommodation, and that you don't infect the wider community. Now, the good news to students watching is you're nearly all young, most of you fit. The probability of you getting serious disease is small, but the probability of you transmitting that disease to others is high. And you don't want to be taking it home to mum and dad and granny and granddad. In fact, you don't want it to be taken to the lady who works in the corner shop, or the staff in the supermarket, or the people in the pub, or anyone else in the wider community. So I'm afraid your mission for the next 2 weeks is to sit it out. There is really no alternative. Now, I know it's not easy. I know it's hard. I know you want to be out doing things. But if you think about, well, I'm not going to bother you with my sob story, what I did when I was 18. I had a pretty hard time. I was a first-year student, psychiatric nurse, which wasn't. Anyway, that's a separate story. But it was difficult. There were severe difficulties, trust me. 1970s psychiatric care was rough and tough and tumble. It was a hard introduction. I had to do that when I was 18. Now there's something hard you have to do when you're 18. Previous generations have had to go out and get shot and died when they were 18. You know, we have a problem. Just got to go through it, I'm afraid, and we will appreciate it. But it does take that 14 days. No way around that. That is determined by the biology of the virus. Now, moving on to another topic that should be in bold: human challenge studies. This is interesting. Now, what's happening at the moment is that we are giving, to test the vaccines, we're giving a lot of people the vaccine, giving the other control group a placebo or a different vaccine, and waiting to see who gets the infection. Wouldn't it make things a lot quicker if we could give the vaccine then deliberately infect people? That's what human challenge studies are. And the UK is the first country to consider this. The government is currently considering doing this in the UK. UK government is holding discussions about it now. Now, of course, this hasn't been done in any other countries in the world. The UK is the first to consider this possibility. Believe that if you want. Now, big history of this. Edward Jenner gave James Phipps cowpox in 1796, so that was done then. It's been done with influenza, malaria, typhoid fever, Zika, dengue fever, cholera. There's a long history of this in the history of infectious diseases with volunteers. And at the moment, this is the One Day Sooner campaign. Do check this out. A couple of links there for them. Quite an amazing organisation and some absolutely fascinating reading on there. I actually got waylaid for about an hour this morning reading through their materials. Very interesting, revealing, useful stuff. Click on the links, they're always there. So they've got 38,000 volunteers all over the world. And this would allow for detailed prospective studies. Everything can be set up ready. They could also test second generation vaccines. These are vaccines that may work that are not being tested at the moment, the vaccines that we might be using in a year's time or something. We could also test therapeutics and gain lots of biological information from these people who would courageously volunteer. It would be unethical to allow people to be infected with the virus who weren't in very low risk groups. Well, it's questionable ethics anyway, but that's what the government's deciding now. So older people, it would be unethical because of their risk. People with comorbidities, it would be unethical because of their risk. Young, fit people who are healthy with a very small chance of getting severe disease, they would be the ones that would volunteer. And a noble thing it would be to do. So that is being discussed now in the UK at the moment. Where am I? There we are. Now, parallels between the UK and US in universities, schools, also in organised protests. Now, there's no doubt there's been legitimate protests going on, but there's also no real doubt, if you look at this, that various vested interest groups have been using the legitimate protest groups as fronts for their activities, often of an anarchy type basis. Now, it turns out there's a group in the UK that I'd never heard of, and I've lived here, or been away for a few years here and there, but lived here most of my life. I'd never heard of this group. StandUpX seems to be organising protests, and the key word there is organising. So the police have been engaged with organisers throughout the week, so this is organised. In other protests, 15 officers were injured last week. This is not acceptable. These are people protesting against lockdown measures and very often anti-vacciners and who knows who. But for 15 police officers to be injured is not acceptable. If you've got a case to make it logically, give your references, give your evidence. I'll listen. But going around injuring people is just not acceptable. Completely unacceptable. Now the commander, this is a Metropolitan police commander. He says this. Metropolitan means it's London based. So, but by flagrantly gathering in large numbers and ignoring social distances, you are putting your health and the health of your loved ones at risk. And these protesters seem to be making a point of breaking the rules. Now, given that the price I have paid personally, and the price that many of you, in fact, I think we can say all of you have paid personally, for that investment to be squandered, to me, is offensive. I'm offended by these protests. I've paid a price and they're just squandering it as if it didn't matter. And I find it offensive. Right, Canada. Interesting from Canada. Are you getting a feeling of déjà vu here? Darker coloured skinned Canadians are getting sicker and hospitalised more than lighter coloured skinned Canadians. Now let's look at this before I try not to get annoyed. So Toronto, May the 20th to July 16th. Black patients, people admitted, were 21% of hospitalisations, population of black Canadians, 9%. So grossly overrepresented. There's more data than that, but that gives you the gist. Grossly overrepresented. But hey ho, the cavalry is coming over the hill and the researchers are coming to research. It isn't that good. So let's look at what the researchers are looking at. What people do. They're looking at occupation, living conditions, crowding, poverty, multi-generational homes. You see, obviously, the explanation for this is socio-economic, isn't it? It's obviously socio-economic. These axiomatic assumptions that are made to in my view, pander to political correctness are just unbelievable, and I feel quite strongly about it because the people that are often most vocal about this may not be from those ethnic groups themselves. That they're offended on behalf of other people, but it's not them that are dying. Black people are more likely to die, and we need to correct that. We don't want anyone to die, we don't want non-black ethnic people sitting there smug, content that no one's been offended, and we don't want any black people going to the cemetery for sake of being offended. Not that it's offensive anyway to research biological factors in disease. Vitamin D is simply not mentioned. Canada's way north. You guys are going to make essentially no vitamin D for the next 6 months. No, you're north of Chicago, for goodness sake. You're way north. You're not going to make any vitamin D. Black skin's going to make it up to 20 times slower than white skin. Anyway, that's what the researchers are looking at. They're also looking at pre-existing medical conditions, which, to be fair, is a factor. And I'm pleased that they're doing antibody studies as well. But this is what happened in the UK. This is what happened in the US. People just seem to jump to the acceptable narrative of socio-economical explanations. When what I want to know is what is the real explanation, so we can start saving a few lives. Right, moving on to the United States. Now, 7 million official cases now in the United States, officially diagnosed. The real number's about 10% of the population. So the real number's about 33 million, according to Robert Redfield the other day. We looked at all this. Deaths continue to climb. Let's look at some figures from the United States. There we are. Yeah, so no, that's the wrong one. That's the Europe one. Sorry, can't get the staff these days. Let's go on to the United States one. There we go. New daily confirmed COVID-19 cases. These are rolling 7-day averages. What a rolling 7-day average means is it puts the figure on the graph today for the average for the past 7 days. Then tomorrow it'll be for the past 7 days, and the day after that it'll be for the past 7 days. So it's a rolling average. Quite useful to look at it in those terms, actually. And this is the figures for the states at the moment. Yeah, definite recent increase again. Now, the other thing that's so concerning from the States is the death rates are remained fairly high. We haven't seen the dramatic reduction in the death rates that we've seen in Europe, unfortunately, in the United States. Nevertheless, Florida's opening all its bars and restaurants again. So at the moment, Florida's R value is just under 1. There we are. It's just under 1 at the moment. 0.96, but only just under 1. And given that we know that bars are often infection drivers, sorry about this, there we are. Given we know that bars are often infection drivers, for example, the pubs have been shut in the UK after 10 o'clock at night, I think it is very likely that the R0 in Florida will rise above 1 again. But that is a decision that's been made in that state. Now, other news from the US. This is a study from Houston. Now, this is interesting. I'm asked repeatedly, is this virus mutating? I was asked it on that Deutsche Welle TV just yesterday. Constantly being asked that. And the answer is a little nuanced. Now, molecular architecture of early disseminated and massive second. So molecular architecture is the shape of the molecule in the thing. Early dissemination. Now, this related to back in January, February. So what they've done is they've looked at the genetics of the viruses in Houston, Texas. And what they've found out that the viruses causing the problem in Houston, way back in January, February, came from other parts of America, South America, Europe, China, came from everywhere, all over the place. And that was identified in January. What's strange, of course, is the first case wasn't officially diagnosed in Houston until February. So it looks like data was being collected because they have the phylogenetic information of those viral infections to the stage where they can accurately state that the virus has come from all these different places. Now, the virus, when the virus divides, doesn't divide, it reproduces inside bacteria divide, viruses reproduce. Inside living cells, it has the chance to mutate, and it's had plenty of chances due to the vast amount of numbers of cases in the United States. So this group has looked at 5,000 viral samples from Houston, ethnically diverse region, 7 million people, genomes recovered back from January. So they've been able to compare the genomes from January and the genomes now, and they have found changes. There has been evolution of this virus. Now, I know a lot of people in the United States get upset about the word evolution. Let's just use the word change, because evolution and change means exactly the same thing. There's been changes in this virus has evolved. There have been changes to the genetic material in the virus that gives rise to changes in the proteins that genetic material results in, that codes for and produces. Therefore, there have been changes to what we call the phenotype of the virus, molecular changes. The question is how significant, of course, are these changes? So they've done that. Viral origins introduced many times independently. It came from all over the place, flying in. Virtually all strains in the second wave. Now, the 600 so all the amino acids are joined together like this. So these are the amino acids that join together to form big long chains. Each dot is an amino acid linked together by bonds, chemical bonds. So that's the protein. Now the 100 and so that's amino acid 1, that's amino acid 2, that's 3, that's 4, that's 5, that's 6, 7, 8, 9. Now the 614th amino acid has changed from an aspartate amino acid to a glycine amino acid. So there's been one change in the genetic material of the virus, and that's resulted in one change in the amino acid, changing the 614th amino acid from the aspartate to the glycine type amino acid. But it's in the spike protein. Now, I think most of us are familiar with this already. I'll just do it remarkably briefly because we've done it many times. Now, the spike protein, there's the virus, and the spike protein is this bit here. It's the bit that sticks into the receptor cells to infect them. So that's the spike protein here. This is the spike protein here, and that's the bit that fits into the cell to cause the infection. Fits into the human cell there to cause the infection. That's spike protein. So it is an important part. It's the bit that bonds with the receptor, the ACE2 receptor, in the cell it's going to infect to allow the virus to get its genetic material into the cell, the RNA into the cell to reproduce. So these are in the spike protein. So they are potentially important. In fact, it's in the receptor binding domain of the spike protein. So the receptor binding domain is the actual bit of the spike protein that fits into the receptor. So if we imagine that this is the imagine we do a blow up of that bit there, that spike protein there. So we have the spike protein here like this, like that. So that's the spike protein. But the very end of the spike protein here is the bit that fits into the cell, and the different molecular structures give that a particular shape. So that is the binding domain, because what that will actually do is this is the bit that actually, if this is the host cell here that's going to fit into, this is the actual bit that fits onto the ACE2 receptor there, and this is the host cell that allows the virus to bind. So that bit is particularly important. There has been changes in that bit, the receptor binding domain spike. And this has been linked to increased transmission and infectivity. It looks like this mutation has made the virus somewhat easier to catch. Now, the study can't quantify how much, a little bit easier to catch, I think is the bottom line. But it's made it enough easier to catch that this has become the dominant strain. So other strains without this mutation have died out, whereas natural selection has selected this viral mutation in. Because it is able to reproduce, it becomes more prevalent. So it's now the dominant viral form in Houston because of that evolutionary change. Linked to increased transmission and infectivity. And what seems to happen is this new virus mutation, this change in Gly614 means that people have higher viral loads in the early stage, therefore they shed more in the nasopharynx on additional diagnosis. So the virus is breathed out more, it's aerosolized more, it goes into droplets more. The relationship between the virus, between the viral changes and altered virulence of the virus, no, that does not seem to be the case. People are not getting sicker, it's just easier to catch. But they did a bit of extra study on this, which is quite intriguing. Now, they use what they call machine learning analysis. Now, to me that means some clever clogs computing thing, I don't know, machine learning or artificial intelligence or something. I don't pretend to understand it. But anyway, that's what they did. And they found something else out. They found out that mortality was independently correlated with the rhesus factor, positive blood. Now, if you want to know about the rhesus factor, I'll try and remember and put a link on. I've done videos on this in the past in great detail, looking at the rhesus factor. But people that are rhesus positive, it looks like they're more likely to be hospitalised, they're more likely to go to intensive care, and they are more likely to die. Now, roughly 90% of us are rhesus positive. Most people are rhesus positive, not that many people are rhesus negative. But interestingly, in American Indians, virtually 99% are rhesus positive. And the R value is 0.22. So what this means is, you probably know this, but if you look at a graph like that, right? So there, if you look at the number of people that die are very sick, and you look at the prevalence of the rhesus factor there, the rhesus positive. Now, if it was a 1-to-1 correlation, that would be a +1. That would be +1. That would be R equals +1, which means that it's definitive that there's a correlation between rhesus factor and the risk of dying. But if there was no relationship at all, the line would be flat. Well, this is 0.22, so we see the line is kind of at that roughly at that kind of angle, like that. There's a degree of correlation here. Is this a genuine result, or is it an artifact of the way that they're analysing the data? I don't think it's an artifact of the way they're analysing the data. I think that was done very well. Is it an artifact of the population group they have studied. Possibly we would need other studies to confirm that. But the rhesus factor, so like on a red cell, that's your red blood cells there. You have blood group. Suppose that was that surface protein was blood group A. That would make your blood group A because you have that. The blood group, of course, is determined by the red cells. So that would be blood group A with that antigen there. Blood group 0 would have no antigens on the surface. Blood group B would have B antigens on the surface like this. There would be a different shape, different molecular shape. Now the rhesus factor is an additional factor and it's either there or not. So it's an additional factor. So if you had a blood cell there with no red blood cell there with no A or B antigens on the surface, but the rhesus factor, that would make that O positive. The red blood cell had no antigens on the surface, that would make that O negative. That, as we've drawn it there, has got the A antigens, but no rhesus factor, so that's A negative. But if that cell had the rhesus factor antigens as well, then that would become A positive. Now, why the heck that should influence the risk of getting very sick and the risk of dying in coronavirus infection is a complete mystery to me. But if the correlations are there and if it's substantiated, it's interesting. And my blood group, I'm quite happy to tell you, is I'm that one. I'm O positive. So that will put me at something like a 22% increased risk, it would appear. But more on that later. Okay, that was a bit of a scientific digression. So basically what we're seeing is, you want to call it a second wave, do you want to call it a sustained increase in cases in Europe? Yeah. Does this bode well for the next couple of months? No. Are the cases dramatically falling off in the United States? No. Is there going to be a vaccine this year? For a few people, for most of us not. Does this mean it's going to be a difficult winter for COVID-19? Yes. Are we virtually going to get rid of everything next year with vaccination? Yes. So the next 6 months is going to be the difficult time. Okay, thank you for watching. I was going to do something on World Health Organization, but I think we'll do that next. This has gone on quite long enough. Okay, thanks for watching.